Why was she the only one who stayed after hours, long after the range lights dimmed and the air smelled of spent gunpowder and silence? Jessica Miller's hands were trembling again, not from fear, not even from exhaustion, but from the quiet pressure she put on herself every single night. A data analyst by day, a ghost at the firing line by night. She adjusted her stance, the same way she always did, left foot forward, weight evenly distributed, elbows tucked in. Her breath caught in the soundproof stillness of the Liberty Range. She fired. The echo cracked, then dissolved into the emptiness. Her target sheet danced slightly from the air pressure. The pattern was close, but not perfect. Jessica frowned. Still off by half an inch, she muttered to herself. Half an inch. The distance between precision and failure, between saving someone's life and ending one. The fluorescent light above flickered, buzzing like a trapped insect. She lowered her pistol, her pulse sinking with the rhythmic hum. To most people this was a hobby, a weekend distraction. But for Jessica, this was ritual. A search for control in a world that refused to make sense since the day her father died. She didn't talk about him often. David Miller, a name she couldn't say without feeling both pride and ache. He had been military, that much she knew, but the details were shadows, locked behind classified and silence. He had taught her to shoot when she was just 11. She still remembered the first time he placed her hands around the grip of his old service pistol. Precision, he had said softly, isn't about hitting the target, Jess. It's about knowing why you're pulling the trigger. Now, more than a decade later, she was still chasing that why. Her last round rang out. And then a voice behind her, calm, measured, carrying the kind of quiet authority that could steady chaos. You're fighting your breath instead of working with it. She turned, startled. A man stood in the next lane, mid-60s, maybe older. Gray hair cut close, clothes plain, posture impeccable. He wasn't just standing there. He was anchored like a man who'd spent his whole life learning how to disappear into stillness. "Excuse me," Jessica asked, lowering her pistol slightly. He gestured toward her stance. "You're breathing against your rhythm. You'll never find stability that way." There was no arrogance in his tone, just observation, the kind that comes from long years of quiet mastery. Jessica studied him carefully. He didn't have the flashy tactical gear others wore. No patches, no emblems, no noise. Just a weathered rifle case beside him, and a focus that seemed to fill the room. She hesitated. "You're military, aren't you?" The man gave a small shrug. "Everyone serves somewhere." He moved beside her, not intruding, just present. Then he spoke again, voice low. "Try this. Breathe in for 4, hold for 2, exhale halfway. On the release, fire, don't fight the breath, use it." Jessica adjusted her stance and followed his instruction. The shot cracked, echoing through the lane. She stared at the target, eyes widening. A perfect center hit. When she turned to thank him, he was already disassembling his rifle. The movement was fluid, practiced, like the kind of habit you only learn when your life depends on it. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. The man paused, then extended a gloved hand. "Bill Carter." He said it simply, like it meant nothing. But there was a weight to his name, one that felt earned, not given. "Jessica Miller," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, efficient. Not the kind of handshake that lingered, the kind that measured. Carter studied her for a moment. "Good form," he said finally, "but form isn't everything." "What is?" she asked. "Understanding." He shouldered his rifle case. "Same time next week." Jessica blinked, caught off guard. "You're assuming I'll be here." Carter didn't look back. "You will be." She was. 7 days later, same hour, same lane. She told herself she didn't know why, but she did. It wasn't just about shooting anymore. It was about learning. Something about this man's calmness drew her in, a magnetism forged from silence, not ego. When he appeared again, she noticed details she'd missed before. The faint limp when he walked, the scar tracing his right forearm, the way his eyes never rested, always scanning corners, exits, movement. He carried himself like a man who had spent a lifetime preparing for chaos. "You came back," he said without surprise. "You said next week," Jessica replied. They worked side by side, the room filled with the rhythm of controlled fire. Carter's movements were precise to the point of artistry, not one wasted motion. Every adjustment, every reloading cycle was deliberate. After 10 rounds, he spoke again. "Your stance is wrong." Jessica lowered her weapon. "Then fix it." Carter moved behind her, his voice low. "Shift your left foot 2 inches. Balance your hips. Let recoil pass through you, not against you." He made small corrections. Nothing invasive, just calibrated. As his hand adjusted her elbow, she noticed again that scar. A deep line, almost surgical, healed decades ago. "What happened there?" she asked. Carter didn't flinch. "Occupational hazard." "Military," she pressed. He looked at her, eyes cold but not unkind. "Does it matter?" "Maybe not," Jessica said, "but you move like someone who's seen more than just a shooting range." He said nothing. Instead, he gestured toward the target. "Try again." She fired. The grouping tightened instantly, a near-perfect cluster. "Better," he said. "Now do it 50 more times." Jessica smiled faintly. 50. Carter's tone didn't shift. "Repetition builds instinct. Instinct keeps you alive when thinking gets you killed." She didn't realize then just how literal that lesson would become. Over the next months, Tuesdays turned sacred. No matter how chaotic her work week became, no matter how empty her apartment felt, those hours with Carter were different. Grounded, purposeful. He taught her not just shooting but patience, discipline, awareness. "Precision isn't about the shot," he said one night, adjusting her grip slightly. "It's about everything that happens before the shot. 90% of a marksman's job is done before they even touch the trigger." His teachings went far beyond hobbyist lessons. He showed her how to read wind through dust motes, how to gauge humidity by breath vapor, how temperature could alter a bullet's path by inches over distance. When she asked how he knew all this, he'd only say, "Different places, different times." But Jessica was smart, data analyst smart. The equations he wrote on her notebook weren't from civilian training manuals. They were military sniper math, windage, drop, Coriolis effect. He was teaching her principles used only by elite marksmen. "Why are you teaching me this?" she asked once. Carter's answer was slow. "Because knowledge dies when it isn't passed on." "And why me?" He looked at her for a long time as if weighing the question. "Because you listen." Others began to notice their sessions. Frank Harrison, the range's resident instructor, loud, confident, always ready to offer unsolicited advice, started to take issue with the quiet old man in lane 7. "I saw the geezer talking to you again," Frank said one night, arms crossed. "Careful with those types. Some old vets like to live out movie fantasies." Jessica ignored him. "His grouping's tighter than yours." Thomas Reynolds, the range manager, overheard the exchange. "You don't know who you're talking about, Frank." "Yeah, then enlighten me." Thomas hesitated. "That man knows more about precision shooting than anyone I've ever met, and I served 20 years. Jessica said nothing, but the thought lingered. Who was Bill Carter? Weeks turned into months. And still he never spoke of his past. He never bragged, never shared war stories. But occasionally, in between lessons, a shadow crossed his face, a memory slipping through restraint. Once, after she'd asked about his hardest shot, he grew quiet. The range noise faded until only his words remained. "Winter, Bosnia, 1994, target at 800 meters, wind cutting between buildings like knives, one shot, one life saved or lost depending on how you see it." He paused. The bullet found its mark. Jessica had felt her breath catch. He didn't sound proud. He sounded haunted. She understood then, whatever he'd done, whatever he'd seen, it had cost him something permanent. Later that night, back in her apartment, she searched the name William Carter Bosnia online. Nothing, no records, no photographs, no official documentation. But she found something else. A 1994 report about a counter-sniper operation during the siege of Scio. An unnamed American marksman had eliminated a Serbian sniper responsible for dozens of civilian deaths. No recognition, no medals, just a brief line. Unknown Allied marksman neutralized threat. Jessica stared at that sentence for a long time. Unknown Allied marksman. Her heart whispered the name anyway, Carter. When she met him again the next week, she didn't mention it. She just watched, listened, absorbed. He had become something between a mentor and a mystery, someone she couldn't explain but couldn't walk away from. During one late session, after she landed another perfect grouping, Carter said quietly, "You're not shooting to hit the target anymore. You're shooting to understand it. That's the difference." She turned to him. "Understand it how?" "The way it moves, the way the air moves around it, the way you move inside the space that separates you from it." Jessica laughed softly. "That's not physics, that's philosophy." Carter's gaze didn't waver. The best marksmen understand both. It would be months before Jessica learned who Bill Carter really was, and why, long before she ever fired a gun, her life had already been linked to his. But on that winter night at the range, she couldn't know that the man beside her had once been a ghost in a forgotten war, or that his teachings would soon lead her to the most dangerous moment of her life. For now, there was only the echo of gunfire, the hum of the lights, and the steady rhythm of her breath aligning, finally, with the calm voice of the man who'd appeared out of nowhere. She didn't know it yet, but the shot that would change everything had already been set in motion. Why was he still teaching her things that weren't in any shooting manual? 6 months into their unusual mentorship, Jessica began realizing that what Carter taught her went far beyond marksmanship. He wasn't training her to hit targets, he was training her to think. At first it was small things, how to breathe, how to see. But then came lessons that had nothing to do with paper targets or brass casings. He began to talk about the space between moments, the invisible gap between decision and action. "You have half a second," he said one evening, resting his rifle on the bench. "Half a second to decide whether what you're about to do is right." Jessica frowned. "Right as in accurate." Carter looked at her. "Right as in moral." That word hung in the air, moral. It didn't belong at a firing range, yet somehow it did. He taught her to calculate angles using trigonometric formulas, then explained how no equation could ever justify taking a life. He described windage in meters per second, then paused to tell her how one wrong choice could haunt a person for decades. Jessica would leave the range every week, both wiser and more burdened. Whatever Carter was preparing her for, it wasn't just shooting. It was judgment, responsibility. Frank Harrison, the loud instructor who didn't like being ignored, had noticed her transformation. She shot cleaner now, moved quieter. Her focus had sharpened into something that made others uneasy. "You've been spending too much time with that old man," Frank said one night, leaning against the wall as she cleaned her weapon. "You're picking up his habits." Jessica didn't look up. "What habits?" "The haunted kind," he said. She paused, staring down at the disassembled pieces of her pistol. "He's teaching me discipline." "He's teaching you something," Frank muttered, "but you don't even know who he really is." When she looked up, he wasn't smiling. "I checked around. Nobody's heard of any Bill Carter in veteran circles. Not local, not state, not anywhere." "Maybe he doesn't want to be found," she said. Frank leaned closer. "You ever ask yourself why?" Jessica didn't answer. But that night, lying awake in her small apartment, she did ask herself, why was a man like Carter here, hidden away at a civilian range, teaching a data analyst how to shoot like a professional operative? The next Tuesday, Carter was already there when she arrived. His setup was immaculate as always, an older rifle, heavily used but perfectly maintained. No flash, no attachments, just precision. He glanced up when she entered. "You're late." "Traffic," she replied. He gave a faint smile. "There's always traffic, preparation accounts for it." It wasn't just a remark. It was a lesson like everything he said. Jessica took her position beside him. For an hour they worked in silence, trading calculations and adjustments. When she finally set her rifle down, she turned toward him. "Frank's been asking questions about you." Carter didn't react. Curiosity is normal. Fear often hides behind it. "He says you're lying about your background." Carter's eyes didn't waver. "What do you think?" Jessica hesitated. "I think you move like someone who's been in danger more than once. I think you know things that can't be learned from books. And I think," she trailed off. "What?" "I think you're teaching me because you see something in me. I just don't know what." Carter packed his equipment. "You'll understand when it matters." It mattered sooner than either of them expected. 2 nights later, Jessica was halfway home when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Ms. Miller," a man's voice asked. "This is Mountain View Emergency Services in Colorado. We're calling about your brother, Mark Miller." Jessica gripped the steering wheel. "What happened?" "He was part of a wildlife research team conducting field work in the Rockies. Their group hasn't checked in for over 12 hours. A blizzard moved in unexpectedly. We've initiated search and rescue." The voice kept talking, explaining terrain conditions, search zones, probabilities, but all Jessica heard was a single phrase repeating in her mind. "Missing. In a blizzard." By the time she reached her apartment, she was already packing. Layers, gloves, flashlight, passport. Then she stopped, staring at her phone. She needed help. Someone who could operate in hostile terrain. Someone who could find what others couldn't. She needed Carter. Thomas Reynolds answered on the third ring. "Liberty Range," Thomas speaking. "Thomas, it's Jessica. I need to contact Bill Carter. It's an emergency." "I'm sorry," Thomas said, hesitant. "Member records are confidential. I can't release that information." "My brother missing in the mountains," Jessica said, her voice breaking. "He's trapped in a storm. Carter knows how to handle this. Please." Silence stretched across the line. Then softly, "I can try to get a message to him. But Jessica, men like Carter, they don't always want to be found." "Tell him this," she said firmly. "My brother's life is on the line. I'm flying to Colorado tonight." She hung up before he could reply. By the time the plane descended over Denver the next morning, Jessica hadn't slept a minute. Her mind replayed Carter's teachings on focus, on controlling breath under pressure. Inhale, hold half, exhale slowly. At the base camp, the rescue coordinator, Robert Collins, briefed her with clinical calm. "Your brother's last known position was here," he said, tapping a point on a digital map. "If they found shelter, they may have a chance. But the storm hasn't stopped for 16 hours. Visibility's near zero. Even our choppers are grounded." "Then we go on foot," Jessica said. Collins shook his head. "Not in this weather. Nobody climbing that ridge in a blizzard." Before she could argue, a gust of wind pushed open the command tent. A man stood in the doorway, dusted in snow, rifle case slung over his shoulder. "Maybe not nobody," he said. Collins frowned. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows the terrain," the man replied, stepping inside. Jessica's heart stopped. "Carter." He looked at her briefly, then at Collins. "Show me your maps." It was like watching command reclaim its throne. Within minutes, Carter was analyzing routes, identifying choke points, avalanche zones, and wind channels with effortless precision. Your team's path runs directly under an unstable cornice, he said, tapping the map. One loud sound and that slope will bury half the valley. You need to reroute through the southeast ridge. Collins folded his arms. That ridge is impassable, too steep, too technical. Not impossible, Carter said simply, just inconvenient. Jessica watched the two men stare each other down, one bureaucratic, one born for chaos. Collins finally asked, "And who exactly are you?" Carter's tone was even. 20 years in reconnaissance, specialized in extreme environment operations. If your people are still alive, that ridge is the only way to reach them. Collins turned to Jessica. "You know this man." She nodded. "He's the reason I believe we'll find my brother." That was enough. Hours later, the blizzard clawed at their faces as they stood at the base of the ridge. Snow swirled like ash, wind howling through the trees. Jessica adjusted her pack, breath clouding in the freezing air. "Once we start climbing," Carter said, "there's no room for panic. You stay within 5 meters of me no matter what." She nodded, tightening her gloves. "Remember what I taught you about control," he added. "Cold kills hesitation first. Keep moving." Then they began. The ascent was brutal. The ridge rose above them like a wall carved by gods, steep, jagged, treacherous. Jessica focused on her breathing, matching Carter's rhythm. Inhale, hold half, exhale, move. Her arms ached, her legs burned, but she refused to fall behind. At one point, the wind surged violently, knocking her off balance. She slipped, her crampons scraping uselessly against ice. "Jessica," Carter's voice cut through the storm. A hand shot out, gripping her harness, pulling her back against the rock face. She clung to the ridge, heart pounding. Carter didn't shout or scold. He just said quietly, "Breathe, regain control. The mountain doesn't care about your fear." She nodded, forcing her lungs to obey. When they started moving again, she felt something shift inside her. The fear didn't vanish, it aligned, became focus. They reached a small ledge halfway up, sheltered by overhang. "How did you even know?" she asked, catching her breath. "Thomas got the message," Carter said simply. "I was already on my way." "Already on your way," she repeated. He looked out at the white void. "Let's just say I keep track of certain emergencies, especially those involving people I've invested time in." It wasn't much of an answer, but Jessica didn't push. His presence was enough. After a brief rest, they pressed on. By dusk, they reached the observation point, a natural rock alcove overlooking the valley. Carter unpacked his gear with methodical speed. She expected binoculars. Instead, he pulled out a thermal imaging scope, military grade. "Where did you get that?" she asked. He didn't answer. "Help me calibrate." Together, they began scanning the valley below. Through the scope, the world became a sea of cold blues and faint reds, heat signatures glowing faintly through the storm. After 20 minutes, Jessica caught something. There, grid H7, faint but consistent, could be a shelter. Carter checked. "You're right, too structured to be natural." Her pulse quickened. "That's them." Carter relayed the coordinates to base camp. "Tell your ground team to reroute through the southeast ridge. They'll have visual coverage from here." Collins hesitated over the radio. "You're certain about this?" Carter's reply was cold and precise. "Certainty doesn't exist, but this is your best chance." He set the scope down, exhaling slowly. Jessica watched him, steady even in chaos, a silhouette carved from discipline itself. "Why are you doing this, Carter?" she asked quietly. "You barely know me." He looked at her for a long time. "Because once, a long time ago, someone did the same for me." Outside, the storm howled louder, a living thing roaring across the mountain. Inside that narrow shelter, two figures huddled beside a rifle case and a flickering radio, watching a valley swallowed by snow. For Jessica, this wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was a test. Every breath, every calculation, Every heartbeat felt like the culmination of everything Carter had taught her. And somewhere down there, in the frozen silence, her brother's life depended on whether she'd learned enough. Why was he walking into the storm, alone? Jessica's voice cracked through the radio. "Carter, you can't go down there, it's suicide." He adjusted his harness, his tone calm, even gentle. "Sometimes the only way to save a life is to risk your own." And then he was gone, swallowed by white. The storm had fully descended on the valley, its roar like a freight train made of wind and ice. From her position under the overhang, Jessica could barely see 5 meters ahead, but through the thermal scope, the world remained visible, strange, and alien in shades of heat and cold. Two faint signatures, one steady, the shelter, one moving, Carter. She could hear him in her earpiece, his voice breaking through static. Maintaining southeast trajectory, visibility minimal, wind speed 20 knots, beginning descent. Jessica's heart pounded with every syllable. She wanted to follow, to help, to move, but his final words before leaving echoed in her head. "Your brother needs you alive, stay here." So she did what he trained her to do, observe, record, and wait. Minutes passed like hours. The radio hissed, cracked, then cleared. Overwatch 2, this is Overwatch 1, reached mid-slope position. No visual yet, continuing descent. Her fingers were numb despite her gloves. The cold gnawed at her, but she refused to leave her post. The valley below was an ocean of white noise and shifting patterns. She scanned, adjusted, recalibrated, until suddenly something flickered on the scope. A second heat bloom, faint, small, roughly 200 meters west of the shelter. "Overwatch 1, she called, trying to steady her voice. "I've got a secondary signature, possibly another survivor." Static swallowed her words, then faintly, "Coordinates." She rattled them off. Carter's response came slow and deliberate. "Understood, it's on my path, I'll check it out." Jessica swallowed hard. "Be careful." The silence that followed was unbearable. She counted seconds between radio updates, each one a lifeline in the void. Finally, after 27 eternal minutes, "Overwatch 2, I've reached the secondary location." She exhaled, gripping the radio. "Status." A pause, then his voice softer now. "Male, early 30s, matches your brother's description." Her breath caught. "Mark." "Alive," Carter said. "Barely. Severe hypothermia, administering emergency treatment now." Jessica bit down on her glove, tears freezing at the corners of her eyes. "Can he talk?" "Not coherent, but he's breathing. That's what matters." Carter's voice shifted, more clipped now, professional. "Relay to base. Immediate medical extraction required. Subject in critical condition. I'll stabilize until the ground team arrives." Jessica relayed the message. The response came quick. "Copy that, Overwatch 1. Ground team en route. ETA 60 minutes. "Too long," Carter muttered. "He doesn't have 60 minutes." She watched through the scope as two heat signatures merged, Carter and Mark. He was moving him. She could see the slight shifts in color as Carter transferred body heat, shielding Mark from the wind. Then the radio crackled again. "Overwatch 2, ground teams delayed by terrain, adjusting route." Jessica's stomach dropped. "How long?" 80 minutes minimum, Colin's voice answered. Carter didn't respond. He just said quietly, "Tell them to hurry." Another pause. Then Jessica's voice trembling but firm. "Carter, what happens if they don't make it in time?" He didn't hesitate. "Then I carry him." An hour later, she spotted new signatures, faint moving dots on the valley's edge. "Overwatch 1, ground team in sight, southeast quadrant, closing distance." Carter's reply came with effort. "Good, tell them to follow my beacon. I've marked the path." Through the thermal scope, Jessica watched the slow, careful progress of the team until the figures merged at Carter's location. "Contact established," came Colin's voice. "Subject located, beginning stabilization." Jessica sagged in relief. Her brother was alive, against all odds, against the mountain itself alive. But even as she exhaled, Carter's voice returned, lower now, more fatigued. "We're not done yet. There are more survivors at the shelter. Carter, let the team handle it." "I'm leading them," he said, cutting her off. "They don't know the terrain. We move now." From above, Jessica watched as the cluster of heat signatures began to shift again, one clearly leading the rest. Carter. Snow poured like liquid glass down the ridges, masking their movement. The storm had reached its breaking point, wind speed spiking, temperatures plunging below zero. She tracked every step, every flicker of light. Then movement at the shelter. Overwatch 1, one survivor exiting structure, moving west away from your approach. "Can you track them?" Carter asked immediately. "Yes, they're moving slow but steady, about 200 meters west toward the rock formations." Carter relayed her directions to the team, voice cutting through interference. "Adjust heading, bearing 275, follow my lead." She could hear his breathing, harsh but controlled. The sound of effort, of someone pushing far beyond what their body should endure. Minutes stretched, the signatures converged 2, then 3. Then suddenly they stopped. Jessica stared through the scope, heart hammering. "Overwatch 1, what's happening?" A long pause, then Carter's voice. "We've made contact, female survivor, conscious but weak. She confirms 2 more at the shelter, both alive." Jessica pressed her hand against her chest. The relief came in waves. "Carter, you did it." "We did it," he corrected softly. But relief was short-lived. Base camp came over the line, voice urgent. "Overwatch team, you have 30 minutes before full whiteout. Begin extraction immediately. Repeat, extraction now." Jessica looked through the scope again, the storm's density increasing. Even through thermal vision, outlines blurred into chaos. She caught Carter's signature, moving toward the shelter again. "Overwatch 1, she called. "Stop, you won't make it out in time." No response, just static. "Carter," she shouted again. Finally a reply, distant, breaking. "Negative, 2 lives still unaccounted for. I'm not leaving until they're out." The wind howled, drowning his words. Jessica slammed her fist against the ice, eyes burning. "You'll die out there." His last clear sentence before the radio faded. "I've died before." She could have screamed, could have begged. Instead, she did what he'd trained her to do, focus. Her breath slowed, her hands steadied. She scanned the valley, watching for every anomaly, every shift in heat or shape. Then she saw it, a pattern forming along the slope above Carter's position. Warmer lines buried in snow. Avalanche risk. "Overwatch 1, stop," she shouted into the radio. "There's unstable snowpack above you. I can see it, it's heating along the ridgeline. Classic trigger zone." The radio crackled, his voice distant. "Can you guide us?" "Turn northeast now, 75 meters to a rock outcropping. It's stable." "Copy," he replied. Through the scope, she watched the team adjust their route, small figures dwarfed by the mountain. Then, for a split second, the image rippled. Movement above them. "The slope's shifting," she yelled. "Run." It was like the world exhaled all at once. Snow exploded down the mountain in slow motion, an ocean of white crashing through the valley. She lost visual, everything swallowed by chaos. "Overwatch 1, do you copy?" she shouted. "Carter, please respond." Static. Seconds passed, then minutes. And then his voice, faint, breathless but alive. "We're secure." Jessica closed her eyes, shaking with relief. "You saved us again, Jessica," he added. "That's twice today." A laugh broke through her tears, just returning the favor. Hours later, the storm eased. The rescue team, battered but alive, began their slow extraction. Jessica descended carefully from her post, guided by base camp over radio. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, her body numb from cold and adrenaline. By dawn, she was in the medical tent, kneeling beside her brother's stretcher. Mark's skin was pale, lips cracked, but his pulse was strong. He opened his eyes slowly. "Jess." She gripped his hand. "You're safe now." His voice was barely a whisper. "The guy who found me, that was insane. He carried me through a storm." She smiled through tears. "Yeah, that sounds like him." Later, she found Carter sitting alone outside, his coat torn, left hand bandaged, eyes distant. "You shouldn't be out here," she said softly. He didn't look up. "I've been through worse weather." She sat beside him, watching the sunrise break over the peaks, pale gold over endless white. "You saved him," she said. He shook his head. "You saved him. You saw what no one else did. The weak heat signature, the avalanche trigger, you saw." She turned toward him. "You taught me how." Carter finally met her gaze. "No, I reminded you. You already had the instincts. You just needed to remember where they came from." Jessica frowned. "What does that mean?" But he didn't answer, not yet. He just stared at the horizon. Hours later, back at the hospital in Denver, Jessica sat beside Mark's bed as doctors confirmed he'd recover fully. When Carter entered, he moved quietly, his presence steady as ever. "How's he doing?" "Stable," she said. "He'll be okay." She looked down at his injured hand. "You're hurt." "Occupational hazard," he said again, the same phrase he'd used the first time she'd seen his scar. But this time she noticed something in his tone, a crack, the smallest hint of vulnerability. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked. "I gave my word once to someone who mattered. He asked me to watch over his family if he couldn't." Jessica frowned. "Who?" Carter reached into his pocket and pulled out a weathered photograph. She took it and froze. It was an old picture, soldiers standing in front of a helicopter, a younger Carter among them, and next to him a face she knew from childhood photos. Her father. For a moment she couldn't breathe. "You knew my father?" Carter nodded. "Captain David Miller. He was my spotter, my partner." Jessica stared at the photograph, her father younger, smiling, alive. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because some truths have to wait until they can be understood," Carter said quietly. "He saved my life more than once. I owed him a debt I could never repay. When I met you at the range, I saw him in your eyes, the same precision, the same patience, the same fire." She blinked back tears. "All this time, you were training me because of him." Carter's gaze softened. "No, Jessica, I was training you because of you." He stood slowly, every movement deliberate. "Your father believed that precision was more than skill. It was a way of protecting life. You proved he was right." He started to leave. "Carter," she said quietly, "what would he have said about today?" Carter paused at the doorway, eyes distant but full of something deeper than pride. "He'd have said what I'm about to. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Then he was gone, as quietly as he had appeared. Why did he disappear without saying goodbye? 3 days after the rescue, Carter was gone. No note, no contact, no trace. Jessica asked the hospital staff if they'd seen him leave. Nobody had. His bed was folded, sheets neatly stacked, like a man who couldn't bear to leave chaos behind. All that remained was the photograph. Her father, younger and alive, standing beside the man who had just saved her brother's life. Jessica turned the photo over in her hands. On the back, written in fading ink, "Bosnia 1994, 2 ghosts with one purpose." She read it over and over until the words blurred. She had spent years trying to make sense of her father's death, the mission nobody would talk about, the silence from every contact she tried to reach. Now finally, the silence had a voice. Back in Boston, her apartment felt smaller. The range felt colder. When she returned to Lane 7 that following Tuesday, it was empty. Carter's stool was gone. The faint oil stains where his rifle case used to sit had been scrubbed clean. The world had moved on, as if he'd never been there. Only she knew better. Thomas, the range manager, found her standing in silence. "He left you something," he said quietly. He handed her a small black envelope, unmarked. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, and beneath it a data drive. The note read, "You once asked why I chose you. You'll find your answer in what's inside this drive. But remember, truth isn't always kind." I see. That night she sat in her apartment, laptop open, thumb hovering over the drive's edge. She hesitated. Carter's warnings echoed in her mind. Truth isn't always kind. But curiosity was stronger than caution. She inserted the drive. The screen flickered. Then a folder appeared, encrypted, military grade. But Carter had left her the passcode scribbled faintly at the bottom of the note. Falcon. When the files opened, her world tilted. There were mission logs, old ones. Operation dates she didn't recognize, coordinates spanning across continents, audio transcriptions, redacted reports. And at the center of it all, Captain David Miller, call sign, Falcon. Her father hadn't just been a soldier. He'd been part of an elite counter-sniper unit, Spectre team, operating in classified missions across Eastern Europe and the Middle East. She read the mission summaries in disbelief. Seal Ridge, Sarajevo extraction, Helios overwatch. One report caught her attention. Asset KIA Captain David Miller, Operation Iron Veil, target neutralized, civilian casualties prevented, surviving operative, William Carter. She read the line 3 times, her pulse hammering. Her father had died saving civilians. And Carter had been there. The drive contained video logs too, grainy, time-stamped footage from a helmet camera. She clicked one. Snow, wind, 2 figures moving across a ridge. The voice she recognized instantly, her father's. Calm, steady, deliberate. Carter, winds shifting 2 degrees east. Adjust by 0.3 mils. Copy Falcon, Carter's voice replied. Then gunfire, chaos, movement. The camera shook violently. Her father shouted, "Get down, he's in the second window." The image cut abruptly, the last frame frozen on a burst of light. Jessica sat frozen, staring at the paused screen. The silence afterward felt heavier than sound. Hours later, she replayed it again and again, studying every frame, every sound. And then she noticed it. In the final seconds before the explosion, her father had thrown himself toward Carter. A blur of motion, a shield. Her father hadn't just died on the mission. He had died saving Carter. Jessica closed her eyes, her throat tight. All those years she'd resented the military for taking him, and all along, he'd been trying to protect someone he trusted. Now that someone had protected her. Days passed in a haze. She went to work, answered calls, smiled when she had to, but her mind stayed somewhere else. Between grief and revelation, between past and present. Carter's training echoed in everything she did now, not just on the range, but in life. The rhythm of breathing, the patience before action, the weight behind every choice. And yet there was an emptiness she couldn't shake. He had vanished just when she'd needed him most. 2 weeks later, a message arrived. An unmarked envelope slipped under her door. Inside, a single sentence written on lined paper. "If you still want answers, meet me at the pier, midnight." Her pulse spiked. No signature, but she didn't need one. The pier was deserted when she arrived. Fog rolled in thick from the harbor, swallowing sound and distance. She stood alone under a flickering light until she heard the crunch of boots on gravel. "Didn't think you'd come," said the voice behind her. She turned. Carter. Same posture, same stillness, but his eyes looked older now, heavier. "I had to," she said quietly. "You left without saying goodbye." "I don't do goodbyes," he said. They make people wait for something that isn't coming back. Jessica stepped closer. Then tell me the truth about my father, about you. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the edge of the pier. They sat, the waves slapping quietly against the wood. Your father and I served together for years, he began. He was the best spotter I ever had and the best man I ever knew, but Iron Veil, that mission broke us both. He paused, his gaze distant. We were sent to neutralize a sniper targeting humanitarian convoys. The shot was mine, but the wind shifted. I hesitated. He saw it moved before I could adjust. He swallowed hard. He saved my life, I didn't save his. Jessica felt her throat tighten. So all this time, you were training me because you felt guilty. He shook his head slowly. No, guilt made me hide. You made me remember what he died for. The wind whipped around them, carrying the smell of salt and memory. After a while, she said softly, "Why show me the files?" "Because secrets kill more people than bullets," he replied. "You deserve to know the truth, not the story the reports told." He turned to her. "And because your father believed that one day you'd take his place, not as a soldier, but as someone who understands when not to pull the trigger." Jessica blinked back tears. "He thought that." Carter nodded. "He told me once, if she grows up to be like her mother, she'll heal people. If she grows up like me, she'll protect them." She smiled faintly through the ache. "I guess I became both." "Exactly," he said quietly. They sat in silence for a long time, the fog thickening around them. Finally she asked, "Where will you go now?" Carter stood, pulling his coat tighter. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere that doesn't need saving." He hesitated, then added, "But if you ever find yourself in danger, real danger, you know how to reach me." Jessica looked up. "How?" He smiled faintly. "Lane 7. And just like that, he was gone again. Not dramatically, not like a hero. Just gone. That night, Jessica couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, staring at the photograph again. Her father and Carter side by side. Two ghosts in uniforms that carried more weight than medals ever could. She thought of her father's words from years ago. "Precision isn't about hitting the target, Jess. It's about knowing why you're pulling the trigger." Now she understood. It had never been about weapons. It was about intention, responsibility, purpose. And she realized something else. Carter hadn't just trained her for herself. He had trained her to finish what her father started, not fighting wars but preventing them. A month later, she stood again at Liberty Range. Lane 7. She set up her rifle, breathing slowly. The hum of the lights filled the quiet. At the far end of the lane, a new target waited blank, unmarked. She didn't aim right away. She just stood there, remembering every lesson, every silence, every moral whisper disguised as a tactical rule. Then she adjusted her stance. Breathe in, hold half, exhale, fire. The shot landed perfectly in the center. But this time she didn't smile. She just whispered, "For both of you." That night as she packed her gear, Thomas approached. "You planning to take a break?" Jessica shook her head. "No, I'm applying for the federal overwatch training program." His eyebrows rose. "Big step." "Yeah," she said, "but it's time." As she left, Thomas called after her, "Carter would be proud." She turned back, smiling softly. He already was. Outside, the sun dipped low over the city skyline, painting the world in muted gold. Jessica walked toward it, not as a soldier, not as a student, but as something more grounded. Someone who understood that real strength isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, patient. And as the camera of life pulled back, city lights flickering below, wind brushing through her hair, her father's words echoed once more. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did it feel more like an interrogation than an interview? Jessica Miller sat at the end of a long table, her posture perfect, her breath steady just as Carter had taught her. Across from her sat three officials, two men and a woman, their expressions unreadable, eyes sharp behind mirrored glasses. Her application to the federal overwatch and reconnaissance program had made it further than most. Out of thousands of candidates, she had reached the final review panel, but she knew enough to recognize this wasn't about her resume. They weren't just evaluating her, they were reading her. "Miss Miller," the woman began, glancing at the file, "your background isn't typical. Civilian data analyst, volunteer range trainer, and now you're applying for federal overwatch certification. Why?" Jessica's answer was calm. "Because precision without purpose is wasted potential." The woman raised an eyebrow. "That's not an answer we hear often." "It's not a goal," Jessica added quietly. "It's a responsibility." There was a pause, brief but telling. The older man on the left leaned forward. "Your file shows advanced ballistics understanding, tactical pattern analysis, and field endurance far above civilian standards. Who trained you?" Jessica hesitated, her father's face flickering in her mind. Then Carter. She chose her words carefully. "A friend, someone who believed understanding is more important than obedience." The panel exchanged glances. Then the woman closed the file. "That's all we need. You'll receive a call within 72 hours. As Jessica stood, the man on the right said quietly, "Miss Miller, Federal Overwatch isn't a program that teaches precision. It tests it, harder than anything you've known." Jessica met his gaze without blinking. "Then it's exactly where I belong." 3 days later, the call came. "Congratulations, Agent Candidate Miller. You're to report to Camp Armitage, Virginia, 500 hours Monday." She exhaled slowly, then smiled faintly, almost bittersweet. "Thank you," she said. When she hung up, she turned to the photo of her father on her desk. "Guess it's my turn now." Camp Armitage was nothing like she expected. It wasn't a boot camp. It was an experiment in human endurance. The first week stripped everything away: comfort, privacy, even certainty. They ran drills through freezing rain, slept 2 hours a night, studied surveillance footage until their eyes burned. But Jessica wasn't like the others. She didn't talk much. She didn't complain. Where others gritted teeth through exhaustion, she breathed through it. Carter's lessons guided her through every hour. "Don't fight the chaos," he'd once said. "Learn its rhythm and then own it." By the third week, only 12 of the original 50 recruits remained. Jessica was the only woman left standing. The instructors didn't make it easier for her. They didn't need to. The course wasn't about strength. It was about clarity. How long can you hold your aim after being deprived of sleep? How do you distinguish between instinct and fear? What do you do when the person you're protecting becomes the threat? They weren't questions for training. They were questions for conscience. And Jessica answered all of them, not in words but in endurance. One night, after an 18-hour field simulation, she returned to the barracks to find an envelope on her bunk. No name, just her call sign, Raven 3. Inside, a single line on official letterhead. "Tomorrow, 400 hours. Observation range B alone." She arrived early, the cold mist hanging over the training field. Range B was deserted, or so she thought. Then she saw him. Carter, standing at the far end of the range, coat dusted with dew, rifle slung over his shoulder. For a heartbeat, Jessica thought she was hallucinating. "You're not real," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Tell that to the wind." She walked closer, emotions tangled: disbelief, anger, relief. "You left without saying a word." "I told you I would," he said quietly, "but I didn't say it was forever." Her pulse steadied, her breathing aligning with the rhythm of old lessons. "You're part of this program." "I helped build it," he said, "long before you knew it existed." They stood in silence for a moment, mentor and student, reunited not by chance, but by design. "You knew I'd come here," Jessica said. "I hoped you would," Carter corrected, "but I didn't plan it. The world has a way of bringing the right people to the wrong places." He handed her a pair of earplugs and a rifle. "Let's see what Armitage has taught you that I couldn't." The next 2 hours felt like reliving a lifetime. He tested her relentlessly: wind calls, distance judgment, stress fire. Each task more punishing than the last, but she didn't break. Her form was sharper, her reaction time faster. But what impressed Carter most wasn't her skill. It was her restraint. At one point, he placed a target silhouette on the range, unarmed, civilian marked. Then a second one, armed but blurred. "2 seconds to choose," he said. "Which one's the threat?" Jessica froze. Both targets seemed wrong. Both were moving erratically. Her breath steadied. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered her weapon. Carter smiled faintly. "Explain." "Not enough data," she said. "You always said a wrong shot is worse than a missed one." He nodded. "Lesson learned." As dawn broke, they sat side by side at the edge of the range, steam rising from their coffee cups. "You've changed," Carter said. "So have you," she replied. He glanced at her quietly. "You've found balance. Most people never do. They either become too soft to act or too hardened to care." Jessica looked at him. "And you?" He gave a tired half-smile. "I used to be the second kind, until someone reminded me of the first." Her chest tightened. "My father." He nodded. That afternoon, during the evaluation debrief, the lead instructor, Commander Reese, summoned her privately. "Agent Miller," he said, scanning her record, "we received an unmarked field recommendation in your file, handwritten, no signature, just a code, Shadow 0. Jessica's heart skipped. What did it say? Reese handed her the note. It read, "She doesn't aim to kill, she aims to protect, that's the difference." Reese studied her. "Whoever wrote this has high clearance, very high." Jessica stayed quiet. "Permission to continue training, sir." Reese nodded slowly. "You've got more than permission, you've got potential." Months passed. Jessica graduated top of her class, not because she was the strongest, but because she was the calmest in the storm. She was assigned to a special recon group, Unit Kilo 7, tasked with low-visibility extraction and overwatch operations. Her designation, Raven 3. Her first mission came sooner than she expected. It was a hostage recovery. Foreign aid workers trapped in a remote border zone between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Tensions were high, media blackout. They were told, this mission never happened. The moment she heard that line, Jessica's stomach turned. She'd read those words before in the files from her father's last mission. As the briefing ended, she stayed behind. Commander Reese looked up. "Something on your mind, Agent Miller?" "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "If this is a non-recorded op, who signs off on the moral authority?" Reese paused, then said, "We operate under trust." Jessica's tone sharpened. "Trust isn't accountability." He regarded her for a long moment. "You sound like Carter." "Maybe because he was right," she said. Hours later, aboard the transport plane, she checked her gear in silence. Her teammate, Sergeant Alvarez, nudged her. "First field op." Jessica nodded. "Relax," Alvarez grinned. "You'll do fine, we're just here to watch and wait." But Jessica didn't relax. She learned long ago, watch and wait could be code for things about to go wrong. As the plane descended through turbulence, she glanced out the window. The mountains below looked hauntingly familiar. Cold ridges, thin air. The kind of terrain where ghosts like to hide. When they landed, the operation unfolded quickly. Kilo 7 set up an overwatch perimeter above the village, where the hostages were believed to be held. Jessica adjusted her rifle scope. scanning rooftops, alleyways, shadow lines. Her breath synced with the rhythm she knew by heart. Inhale, hold, exhale. Through the crosshairs, she saw movement, a man, armed, stepping toward the main compound. Then another figure appeared behind him, smaller, unarmed. A woman. The scene blurred with déjà vu. Carter's voice whispered in memory. Sometimes, not pulling the trigger is the hardest kind of courage. She hesitated, seconds that felt like eternity. Then the radio crackled. Raven 3 status. Target identified, she said slowly, but engagement uncertain. Civilian proximity too close. Copy that, hold fire. Her finger eased off the trigger. Moments later, the ground team breached the compound, clean, silent, efficient. 5 minutes later, the call came through. Hostages secured, 0 casualties. Jessica exhaled, her shoulders trembling. For the first time, she understood the full weight of Carter's teaching. When they returned to base, Commander Reese called her in. "You held fire," he said. "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed direct threat protocol." "Yes, sir." He studied her for a long time, then finally said, "Good." Jessica blinked, "Sir." Reese smiled faintly. Sometimes the hardest order to follow is the one that isn't given. Later that night, Jessica sat alone in the barracks, cleaning her rifle under dim light. From the corner of her eye, she saw something tucked in her case, a folded note. She unfolded it carefully. No signature, just a line written in clean, deliberate handwriting. "You've learned what your father couldn't. You've become what I hoped. Keep watching, Raven. Not everyone who aims means harm." "I see." Jessica closed her eyes, breathing in deeply. Then she whispered to the empty room, half prayer, half promise. "I'll keep watching always." Outside, the night deepened, silent and vast. Stars scattered like distant muzzle flashes across the sky. And as the wind moved softly through the barracks, her father's voice, or maybe Carter, echoed one last time. In the end, precision is nothing without compassion. Why did the shot feel heavier than the rifle itself? Jessica Miller had fired thousands of rounds in her life, each one precise, deliberate, meaningful. But tonight, as the crosshairs hovered over a target in a foreign valley half a world away, her finger wouldn't move. She had learned to steady her breath, to silence fear, to see through distance like a hawk trained on instinct. But this wasn't fear. It was doubt. The kind of doubt that comes when training meets conscience. The mission was simple on paper. Objective: secure perimeter, confirm visual on high-value target, Orion, an insurgent financier responsible for multiple civilian attacks. Location: a remote settlement near the borderlands. Command: no collateral, clean engagement. But missions never stay simple when people get involved. Jessica was set up on an overwatch ridge, her spotter Alvarez beside her. They had been stationed there for 7 hours. Wind was constant. The light was dying. The air smelled of dry sand and static. "Target entering compound," Alvarez whispered through the comms. "Time check 1904. Jessica adjusted her scope, zooming in. Through the thermal overlay, she saw the target, tall, dark jacket, walking briskly. A confirmed visual. "Raven 3, you are clear to engage when ready," came Reese's voice over the radio. Jessica didn't respond right away. Her scope followed the man as he disappeared into the building, then reappeared a moment later, holding something. It wasn't a weapon. It was a child. A little girl, maybe 6, crying, clinging to his shoulder as he carried her inside. Jessica's breath faltered. "Command, we have civilian contact," she whispered. Static, then Reese's voice clipped. "Acknowledge, Raven 3. Do not engage until confirmation of separation." She exhaled, "Copy." The clock ticked, shadows stretched, the waiting grew heavier. Alvarez muttered, He's using the girl as cover. I've seen it before. Jessica didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window where movement flickered behind thin curtains. Then faintly, through her earpiece. Raven 3, prepare to engage. Target moving to vehicle. Civilian no longer visible. She steadied her breath. Wind speed 9.3. Distance 642 meters. Coriolis drift negligible. Everything aligned. And yet she hesitated. In that frozen second, Carter's voice came unbidden. You can't always trust what you see through the scope, Jess. The closer you zoom in, the more you miss the bigger picture. She lowered her rifle slightly. Command, confirm civilian clearance. Raven 3, this is not optional, take the shot. She swallowed hard. Alvarez glanced at her. Jessica, do it. Through the lens, she saw the man walking fast, head low, jacket shifting, as if something were tucked inside. Could be a weapon, could be the child. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. If she waited, she risked her team. If she fired, she risked everything she stood for. Raven 3, respond, Reese demanded. Her hand shook once, the faintest tremor. Then she whispered, negative, no shot. Silence. Then chaos. Through the headset came Alvarez's shout. He's running, vehicles moving. The convoy roared to life below, dust exploding in its wake. Reese's voice thundered through the comms. All teams intercept, target on the move. Raven 3 refused engagement. Jessica froze. The sound of her own heartbeat was deafening. Alvarez looked at her, fury and disbelief mixing in his eyes. You just let him go. I didn't have confirmation, she snapped back. You had orders. He stormed off to relay coordinates. Jessica stayed behind, staring through her scope, the echo of what could have been ringing louder than any gunfire. Hours later, the op ended in near disaster. The convoy had been intercepted, but not before it detonated an explosive device near an Allied checkpoint. 2 soldiers were wounded. The target, Orion, escaped. Back at base, Jessica's silence was met with stares that burned. Reese's debrief was cold, surgical. Your hesitation compromised the mission, he said flatly. Do you understand the gravity of that? Jessica sat upright, every muscle locked in control. Sir, I didn't have full visual confirmation of civilian clearance. You had the order, Reese countered. And I had reason to believe the target wasn't alone. Reese's jaw tightened, and because of that reason, 2 men are in critical condition. Jessica didn't flinch, and because of that same reason, 1 little girl might still be alive. The silence after that was the kind that ends careers. Reese's voice was low. You're on indefinite review. Until further notice, you're grounded. She didn't fight it. Didn't argue. Didn't defend herself. She walked out of the command office, past the staring faces, past Alvarez's silence, past the mission board that already listed her op as incomplete. In the barracks, she packed in silence, the rhythmic motion of folding, closing, securing. Each movement a memory of Carter's lessons, now turned into questions she couldn't answer. Was she right? Was she reckless? Did mercy have a place in this line of work, or was it just weakness dressed in moral words? That night she couldn't sleep. The wind outside the base whistled through the fences, an old, familiar sound. She reached for her phone without thinking, scrolling to the number she'd never used but never deleted. Lane 7. That's all he'd said. She typed the message anyway. I hesitated, people got hurt, I need to know if I failed. She didn't expect a reply. But a minute later, the screen lit up. Unknown number. Failure isn't the opposite of success, Jess. It's the cost of conscience. Meet me where the noise ends. She knew where that was. 2 days later, she stood in a place few ever found by accident. a quiet overlook beyond the base perimeter, where the training grounds ended and the forest began. And there he was, Carter, sitting on a fallen log, coat zipped to the neck, hands resting on his knees. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You've been busy," he said softly. "Not successfully," she replied. He motioned for her to sit. "Tell me." She told him everything, the mission, the hesitation, the child, the order she refused. When she finished, she looked at him, searching for approval or forgiveness. But Carter didn't give either. He just nodded slowly. "And do you regret it?" Jessica hesitated. "I don't know yet." "Good," he said. "That means you still have a conscience." She looked at him, frustration breaking through. "You told me hesitation gets people killed." "I told you panic gets people killed," he corrected. "Hesitation is different. Hesitation is the space between instinct and morality. That's where humanity lives." Jessica's eyes stung. "Then why does it feel like I failed everyone?" "Because the world doesn't reward restraint," Carter said quietly, "but it needs it more than ever." The words hung in the cold air between them. After a long pause, Jessica whispered, "You always knew this would happen, didn't you? That I'd have to choose between orders and what's right." Carter looked toward the horizon. "Every good soldier faces that choice. The bad ones never notice it." He stood, pulling his gloves on. "They'll question you. They'll try to break you. Don't let them. What you did out there, that was the hardest kind of courage." Jessica looked up. "And if I'm wrong?" He turned back. "Then you'll live with it just like I did." Before she could ask what he meant, he was already walking away, his silhouette swallowed by fog and distance. And in that moment, she realized something. Every time he appeared, it wasn't coincidence. It was timing. He always showed up when she was about to lose herself. The next morning, Reese called her into his office again. He looked different, tired, thoughtful. "We recovered footage from a nearby drone," he said. "It confirms your target had a civilian with him. The child survived. The man fled using decoys." Jessica didn't move, didn't speak. Reese continued, "You were right, and if you had fired when ordered, that child would have died." He leaned back, studying her. "You disobeyed orders, but you upheld what this program was supposed to stand for." He paused. "Your record is cleared. Effective immediately, you're reinstated." Jessica nodded once. "Thank you, sir." He gave a faint smile. "Don't thank me. Thank whoever taught you to think before pulling the trigger." That night, Jessica stood alone at the range behind the base, a small, unofficial space soldiers used after hours. She loaded one round, sighted in, and whispered into the quiet. "For you, Carter, for the ones we couldn't save, for the ones we still can." The shot cracked through the night, sharp, clean, final. Then silence again. Not the silence of guilt, but of peace. When she returned to her quarters, another note waited on her cot. "You hesitated once. You'll do it again. That's what will keep you human. Never trade your soul for approval." "I see." She smiled faintly, folding it into her journal. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains, not the sound of war, but of distance, of storms that come and pass and leave the world quieter for their presence. And as she lay down, the old mantra came back, the one that had started everything. Precision isn't about hitting the target. It's about knowing why you're pulling the trigger. For the first time, she truly understood it. Why was Carter's name showing up in a mission that didn't exist? It had been 6 months since Jessica's reinstatement. 6 quiet, methodical months. Her name now carried weight inside federal overwatch, a reputation built on composure, intuition, and impossible restraint. The kind of agent who could look down a scope, see chaos, and still choose humanity. But peace never lasts long in this line of work. It began with a briefing, an operation codenamed Silent Rain. The target, a rogue paramilitary network smuggling advanced drone systems out of Eastern Europe. Intelligence suggested ties to former Black Ops contractors. High risk, zero margin for error. Jessica sat in the operations room, surrounded by high-ranking officers. Commander Reese stood at the front, grim-faced. "This isn't a conventional takedown," he said. "We're going after the architects, the ones pulling the strings." He tapped the screen, pulling up a photo grainy zoomed in. A man in a heavy coat, gray beard, walking beside a convoy of vehicles. Jessica's breath froze. Even through the blur, she knew that posture, that stillness, that silence. It was Carter. The room seemed to tilt, voices blurred into static. Reese continued, "The subject is known only as Spectre, believed to be coordinating weapons trade routes and training ex-military personnel off-record. Multiple sightings across Europe, all inconclusive until now." Jessica's mind spun. Spectre, the code name Carter used in one of her father's old mission files. She felt her throat tighten. "Sir," she said carefully, "this photograph, where was it taken?" Reese looked at her. "Romania, border town, 2 weeks ago." "Are we sure it's him?" "That's what the intel says. Why?" Jessica's lips parted, but no words came. She just shook her head slowly. "No reason, sir." After the briefing, she sat alone in the hallway, heart hammering against her ribs. Carter alive, operating under a new name, tied to illegal arms trade. It didn't make sense. He had saved lives, not destroyed them. He had lived by principle, not profit. Unless there was something she didn't know. That night, Jessica couldn't shake the image. She replayed every memory, his lessons, his silences, his scars. Had he been preparing her for something darker? She turned on her laptop and pulled up the encrypted files Carter had left months ago. Buried inside a subfolder she hadn't opened before, she found a series of redacted documents, stamped classified/EYES only. One caught her attention: Project Helios Post-Operational Assessment. The report mentioned her father's death, but beneath the official summary, a note was embedded in metadata, a fragment of a private transmission. It read, "Carter alive, standing order terminated, Spectre classified, reactivated under deep cover." Her stomach dropped. Carter wasn't a fugitive. He was undercover. The next morning, she stormed into Reese's office. "Sir, that man, the one you called Spectre, he's not who you think he is." Reese looked up slowly. "Agent Miller, I need you to tread carefully." "I know him personally," she said. "He trained me, saved my life, saved my brother." Reese's expression didn't change. "Then you know how dangerous he can be." She frowned. "Dangerous? He's not a criminal." Reese leaned back. "You're assuming we haven't confirmed intel. We've tracked Spectre for months. Arms routes, encrypted comms, ghost accounts, all tied to his signature patterns. It's him." Jessica's pulse quickened. "You don't understand. He's deep cover. He must be embedded." Reese's voice hardened. "You're speaking like someone emotionally compromised." She stepped forward. "I'm speaking like someone who knows him better than any of your analysts." Reese stood, his tone now final. "You're off the mission, Agent Miller." That night she packed her bag. Not because she accepted the order, but because she didn't. Carter had once told her, "When the truth doesn't fit the report, follow the silence." So that's exactly what she did. Within 48 hours, Jessica was off-grid, using old access codes Carter had once slipped into her range notes years ago. They still worked, each one unlocking a path deeper into the intelligence web he had left behind. She traced his last known route through Romania, local contact reports, satellite imaging, heat patterns. And finally, a location appeared. Coordinates: 45, 8,762 degrees N, 26, 7,535 degrees E, an abandoned observatory near the Carpathian foothills. She booked her flight that night. When she arrived, the air was thin and cold. Snow layered the valley floor like silence itself. The observatory loomed above her, cracked glass, rusted steel, a relic of another century. Inside, the halls echoed with dripping water and faint hums of long-dead machinery. She moved carefully, flashlight steady. And then a sound. A metallic click, followed by a voice that froze her blood. "Put the weapon down, Raven." She turned slowly. Carter stood in the shadows, rifle lowered, expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. Just the sound of wind threading through broken glass. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally. "You shouldn't be on a watch list," she shot back. He exhaled slowly. "You saw the file." "I saw lies," she said. "Tell me the truth." Carter walked closer, his face catching the faint light. "I was reactivated. Deep cover. The kind of mission that doesn't get written down anymore." "Then why are they calling you a traitor?" "Because sometimes, to dismantle a network, you have to look like part of it." Jessica's jaw clenched. "They think you're selling weapons." "I'm selling trust," Carter said simply, "to the wrong people for the right reason." He turned away, looking out through a shattered window. "The men I'm after were part of Project Helios, the same operation your father died trying to shut down." Jessica's breath hitched. "You mean?" "Yes," Carter interrupted quietly. "It never ended. They just buried it. Changed the names, changed the faces." He looked back at her, eyes weary but sharp. "I went dark to finish what he started, to make sure no one else dies for secrets they never chose." Jessica stared at him, every emotion crashing at once: anger, relief, admiration, grief. "You should have told me," she whispered. "I couldn't," he said. "You were still on the inside. If they suspected you, the mission was over." Then faintly, movement echoed through the observatory, the sound of boots. Carter's eyes flicked toward the door. "They found you." Jessica's blood ran cold. "Who?" "Both sides," he said grimly. "The agency and the people I've been hunting." He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a side corridor. "We're out of time." Bullets shattered the silence. Jessica ducked, following Carter through a maze of halls lit only by their flashlights. "Contact front," Carter called, returning fire with precision that reminded her of every lesson he'd ever given. They moved as one, teacher and student, rhythm and breath in perfect sync. "Exit tunnel ahead," he shouted. They burst into the night, the air cold and sharp, snow crunching underfoot. For a moment it was quiet again. Then Jessica turned to him, voice trembling. "What now?" Carter checked the horizon. "Now you make a choice." "What choice?" He met her eyes. "Go back to them, clear your name, tell them what you saw, or stay with me, finish what your father started." Jessica stared at him, her mind torn in two directions. Duty or truth, order or conscience. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying his next words like a prophecy. "If you walk away now, you'll survive, but you'll never understand what your father died protecting." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said quietly, "He believed in protecting life. So do I." Carter nodded once. "Then let's finish this." Somewhere far below, the night trembled with distant sirens and thunder. And in the glow of a dying moon, two silhouettes disappeared into the forest, one carrying a past full of ghosts, the other carrying the weight of their legacy. Neither speaking, neither certain of what came next, but both knowing this wasn't the end. It was the reckoning. Why did endings always feel like beginnings disguised as silence? The forest was still. Only the echo of wind moved through the trees, low, mournful, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. Jessica followed Carter along a narrow ridge, her boots crunching through frost. They'd been walking for hours, no radio contact, no light, no sound except their steady breath. Finally, Carter stopped, crouching behind a fallen tree. "We're close," he whispered. "Close to what?" He nodded toward a faint orange glow ahead. "The truth." Through the trees, Jessica could make out an old communications outpost, half buried in snow. Satellite dishes lay broken, fences rusted, the place a forgotten scar from another war. Carter's voice lowered. "Project Helios was born here, before your father shut it down." They approached slowly, the crunch of ice underfoot masked by the wind. Inside the compound, dim lights flickered, not the harsh white of military power, but the yellow pulse of generators. Someone was here. Carter motioned for silence. He moved like a shadow, clearing each corner, checking every door. Jessica followed, rifle raised, breath shallow. They found the main control room, walls lined with old monitors, half still functioning. Dust coated everything except a central terminal, still warm, still active. "Someone been running transmissions," Carter muttered. "Encrypted short bursts, black channel." Jessica stepped closer, scanning the logs. "Look at the timestamps, regular intervals, every 2 hours." He frowned. "Automated relay, whatever they're sending, it's still live." Then a sound. A faint click behind them. Both turned instantly. A man stood in the doorway, older, unshaven, wearing a worn tactical jacket. His hands were raised, but his eyes burned with calculation. "Well," the man said, voice smooth but cold, "the ghosts finally came home." Carter raised his rifle. "Put your hands where I can see them." The man smirked. "Always the same tone, Bill, even after all these years." Jessica's blood chilled. "You know him." Carter's voice was ice. "I used to." The man stepped forward slowly, ignoring the weapon pointed at him. "Name, Kravik, head of the old Helios team. You've heard of me, I'm sure. I trained the men who built this place." Jessica's grip tightened. "You're the one who ordered the Sarajevo operation, the one who—" "Killed your father," Kravik finished casually. "No, I didn't kill him, he chose to die, big difference." Her breath caught, fury rising. "He died saving lives." Kravik shrugged. "He died believing in fairy tales. You think any of this was about saving people? Helios was built to control conflict, to create order through selective influence." He gestured at the console. "That terminal you're so fascinated by, it doesn't launch weapons, it launches decisions. Wars, regimes, entire narratives, that's real power." Jessica's voice shook. "You're manipulating nations." He smiled faintly. "We prefer to call it balance." Carter stepped closer, weapon steady. "You're still running Helios transmissions." "Someone has to," Kravik said. "The world doesn't manage itself." "You turned it into chaos," Carter hissed. "David died trying to stop you." "And you've been chasing ghosts ever since," Kravik said. "How many people did you sacrifice for your vendetta, Spectre?" Jessica froze at the name. The code whispered like poison. "Spectre, Carter's old call sign." She turned to him. "He's lying." But Carter's silence was answer enough. Kravik smiled. "She doesn't know, does she?" "Don't," Carter warned. But Kravik's tone was silk and venom. "Your father wasn't the only one at Iron Veil that day," he said. Carter pulled the trigger on the wrong window. His shot started the chain reaction. Your father jumped in front of him because he hesitated, because he missed. Jessica felt the air leave her lungs. "No." Carter's voice was low, broken. "It's true." The world blurred. Every sound became distant. Her father's face, Carter's lessons, the photograph, all of it twisting into something heavier, more human, more tragic. She whispered, "You killed him." Carter's eyes glistened. "He saved me." Kravik chuckled softly. "There it is, the moral poetry. You always did love that kind of pain." Jessica's rifle trembled. "Why tell me this?" Because, Kravik said, you deserve to know the kind of men you've been protecting. Both of them believed they were saving the world. Neither realized they were just keeping it spinning. Carter's tone shifted, quiet but lethal. You talk too much. And you act too little, Kravik countered. The moment stretched, 3 lives hanging in balance between truth, vengeance, and silence. Then Kravik's hand twitched toward his coat. Carter fired first. The shot echoed through the compound, shattering glass and memory alike. Kravik fell, eyes wide, one last smirk fading into stillness. Jessica stood frozen, her rifle shaking in her hands. Carter lowered his weapon slowly. He was reaching for a detonator. Or maybe you were just finishing what you started, she said bitterly. He met her eyes. Believe whatever helps you sleep. For a long time, neither spoke. The hum of the console filled the silence, its lights blinking steadily, a heartbeat that refused to stop. Jessica finally asked, "What happens now?" Carter walked toward the terminal. "We shut it down for good this time." He started typing, his movements fast, deliberate. Helios is still connected to multiple channels, data feeds, strike protocols, psychological ops. You can't destroy it from outside. You have to end it here. Jessica stepped beside him. "Then let's do it." He glanced at her. "Once I initiate purge, there's no backup. We'll lose everything, even proof that it existed." "That's the point," she said softly. Carter's expression softened, pride and sorrow all tangled together. "You really are his daughter." He keyed in the final command. A countdown appeared on the monitor. 60 seconds. Jessica looked around the room, all the relics of a system built on control and silence. Carter stood still, eyes locked on the screen, the glow painting his face in pale gold. "Time to go," she said. He didn't move. "Carter," she repeated louder, "we have to go." He turned slightly. "I can't." Her heart dropped. "What do you mean you can't?" He nodded toward the manual override switch hardwired to his access chip. "The system recognizes me as Spectre. If I leave, it aborts the purge." Her breath caught, then removed the chip. "It's implanted," he said quietly. "Failsafe." The countdown flashed, 30 seconds. Jessica stepped closer, tears already forming. "No, there has to be another way." He smiled faintly, the same calm, maddeningly steady smile he'd worn the first day they met. "There always is, Jess, but this time it isn't mine." She shook her head. "You can't do this." "I already did," he said softly. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a folded note, worn from time and distance. "Give this to your brother," he said, "and tell him the world doesn't need more soldiers. It needs more people who think before they act." "Don't do this," she whispered. His voice gentled. "You once asked me why I taught you. It wasn't to make you a weapon. It was to make sure someone remembered that weapons don't have to fire." The countdown hit 10. Jessica's tears broke. "Please." Carter smiled faintly. "Go Raven live." She hesitated one last second, then turned and ran. The explosion wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, more collapse than destruction. A wave of air, dust and finality rolling out from the old observatory. And then silence. Jessica fell to her knees outside, snow mixing with smoke, her breath ragged. The sky above was pale, almost kind. She whispered into the wind, "You finished it." Somewhere inside, she imagined him steady, calm, unflinching, as the lights dimmed and the ghosts finally went quiet. Days later, the report would read: unknown explosion destroyed abandoned communications hub. No survivors. Project Helios confirmed inactive. No mention of Spectre. No mention of Carter. Just another classified success story. At her debrief in D.C., Reese met her with a solemn nod. "You did the right thing." Jessica's gaze was steady. "He did." Reese hesitated. You understand this can't go in the record. I know, she said. Some truths don't belong in files. Before leaving, Reese handed her a small envelope. This arrived for you, no sender. Inside was a single photo, the same one she'd held months ago, her father and Carter side by side. But this time, written beneath it in new ink. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Weeks passed, the world moved on. But Jessica didn't forget. She transferred out of active overwatch, choosing instead to teach, training new recruits not to fight harder, but to think deeper. On her first day as an instructor, she stood before the class, rifle in hand. Her voice was calm, deliberate. You'll learn how to aim, how to move, how to act under pressure, she said. But none of that matters if you don't understand why. Precision is only half the job. The other half is compassion. One recruit raised a hand. Ma'am, who taught you that? Jessica smiled faintly, eyes distant. A man who knew what it cost to forget. Later that night, she visited the range alone. Lane 7. She set her rifle down, loaded a single round, and whispered into the quiet. For you, Carter, for him, for all the ghosts we learned to live with. The shot cracked through the still air, echoing against the walls, not of anger, not of pain. Of peace. And as the echo faded, the camera of life pulled back from the woman at the range, to the empty stool beside her, to the faint sunlight creeping through the window. Because some legacies don't need monuments. They just need memory. And some heroes don't need recognition. They just need someone to remember why they fought at all. Narrator softly, final line. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.